So today's topic is Beyond the Hype, the truth about AI in training, a spicy topic, and I am thrilled to be joined by this all-star panel hosted by the one and only Donald H. Taylor. There's a lot to talk about, so I'll close these slides and pass it over to Don for intros in just a moment. But before I do, for those who are not familiar with Arlo, Arlo is a training management software that you and your learners will love. It's purpose-built for anyone running instructor-led training, giving you the tools you need to create, schedule, sell, and deliver live, self-paced, and blended training all in one powerful and easy-to-use platform. In an age of rapid AI innovation, we here at Arlo are still massive advocates of the human advantage, the role instructors and peer learning plays in education. We see technology as an enabler of this, and Arlo offers powerful AI course authoring. So all of these e-learning modules that you see on the screen were created in Arlo, alongside seamless course scheduling and delivery tools, which is really our bread and butter. Ultimately, we're passionate about helping you deliver exceptional training, so modern, engaging courses across multiple sessions and formats, from pre-reading, e-learning to in-person, live online sessions, all managed seamlessly for you and your learners, from registration and payments all the way through to certification. So make sure to check us out and book a chat with one of our team to learn more. Don.
I'm Donald Taylor. So I've been around for a while. I've spent my entire life in this field. I've chaired the Learning Technologies Conference in London for 26 years. I've run the Learning and Development Survey Series since 2014. Our AI in L&D report comes out next week. I've got 40 years in this field, and I've worked as a practitioner. Now I work mostly as a researcher, advisor, and investor. I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Scott, just at random, you're there on the screen. First in my sights, can you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Don. Glad to be here today. My name is Scott D'Amico. I have 20 plus years of experience in the education and training space, spanning career as a classroom teacher in high school, more than a decade at a large online university system designed and geared towards working adult learners, and the past 8 years focused in on soft skills development from a training provider perspective, as well as more recently in the courseware distribution space for IT training and certification, working through training providers globally.
Scott, it's almost like you've done this before and you know how to introduce yourself clearly and succinctly. That was brilliant. I just want to give a shout out to the people in the room. Fabulous feedback coming through here. And there's this real balance, if you're reading what's coming through, between the excitement, I can do things faster. Gemma says, the ideas you can give you haven't thought about. And Carsten says it makes some weird decisions like scheduling, but it will replace a lot of instructional designers. Things coming past too fast in the chat for me to give everybody a shout out, but please do look at it. Stella, you're next on my list. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Don, and hi, everybody. I'm Stella Lee, founder of Paradox Learning. I'm based in Calgary, Canada. Shout out to the fellow Canadians in attendees. So happy to see so many of you. I work in the intersection of education, technology, and design. Over 2 decades. I felt quite proud to say 2 decades until Don said 4 decades. So I felt like it's just half the time. Internationally, as consultant, researcher, educator, and speaker. My work focuses on helping organizations to develop learning strategy, build AI literacy, evaluate learning technology with intention, and also preparing the workforce for this very fast-changing future. Lately, I've been especially focused on making AI more understandable, more accessible, and more usable for non-technical professionals across sectors. So,
Brilliant, Stella, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you've got this real focus on the skills. Sorry, go on. Finish off, sorry.
No, that's it. Just thank you.
Thank you so much. And finally, Elena Agaragimova from, you're coming in from the East Coast of the States. I think we've got just about everywhere represented in our panel today. Elena.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you, guys. So I'm based in the Washington, D.C. metro area, Northern Virginia. I come from about 15 years of experience in learning and development, and started my career in higher education, moved into corporate learning. I've also been a builder and creator throughout this journey. And as a builder and creator, very excited about AI. And right now, the latest project is I'm building ShiftWall.ai, which is a platform we're building. And very excited to be here and talk all things AI and training.
Thank you so much, Elena. Great to be here. And like Andre was saying at the beginning, it's a really good world-class crew we've got here to discuss these issues. I am really appreciative, by the way, of everybody's feedback in the chat. This is great. Mel has said this is what makes the chat so valuable, is people sharing honestly up front. And if I can summarize what everybody said very briefly, there's the insight that we get increased speed, but do we remove ourselves too far from the humanity of training? That's in a nutshell, I think, what people are saying. People are concerned about it, and I'm loving it. Please do keep them coming. I'm going to start with our first question to our panel. Everyone, look, we talk a lot about AI, but often the talk's a bit vague. So to be concrete, and remember, we're focusing on the training provider community here. What does success in using AI in training look like? We're using AI. What does it look like when it's successful? Let's try and set that as sort of North Star for the discussion. Who would like to start off? Elena, you're using AI at the moment, presumably.
Yeah, sure. So I'll try to keep it short because I think there's a lot we can cover here. But in a nutshell, I think between three of us we can spend hours. So in a nutshell, I think that when I think of success in using AI in your work, it's like, how do I partner with it? How do I not just just completely outsource, right, and like remove myself from the situation and worry about it, but how do I partner with it? And I think that's a good way to think about AI because it does bring a lot of different benefits. And it's just the first question I kind of have for the audience maybe to think about is looking at like just auditing, how are you currently using AI or not using an AI? And if you're not using it, what, brainstorm like what can you use it for? And then determine what success might look like for you as well, right? For me, it's that partnership, but for everybody it's going to be different. So I think it's just about that audit is important for starters. I'll pause here.
Elena, love the way you're so concise. And I think that's a really good point, that we may say what we think is great, but everything depends on context. And auditing it yourself to understand your own context is crucial. Stella, what does great AI use look like in training?
Yeah, very much echo Elena's sentiment about you have to define what success looks like to you, right? So I actually just facilitated an AI literacy workshop in person, as well as a couple webinars a couple weeks ago. So it's still very fresh on my mind about that. Like to me, from a very learner-focused perspective, it's to help learners feel more supported, more curious, more empowered, more agency, and not just having them feeling they're being surveyed or confused or disengaged. So concretely, it could mean helping them to ask better questions, not just to get answers more fast, more quickly, to actually provide real feedback, to have more personalized or adaptive feedback. This is my research field for a couple of decades. I think AI has that real potential now to actually provide more adaptive learning and feedback at scale. And also the tools that we use to able to track progress, to reflect learning, to connect what they're doing next. I think a lot of the comments in the audience actually echo that sentiment as well. So for me, it's not about just chasing automation and do things faster, but it's really augmenting human learning in a way that's intentional.
I like the idea of not necessarily doing things faster. We had a great comment from Sumner saying, look, my concern is accuracy. If everything has to be double checked, how much time are we actually saving? And it's a very valid point. But also your point to go beyond that and talk about augmenting what's happening. I think that's a really, really good point. And we're going to come back to this on the panel, Stella. One question I have is, are people ready for it? Are people ready to change the way they learn from a paradigm which is I'm going to sit and receive to your point, I'm going to have to learn how to ask better questions. But let's leave that for later on. Scott, what makes great AI use?
I think it's two big things. From a training provider perspective, it's really having that top-down approach to it. So does your training organization have buy-in from the highest level? It's going to be hard for AI to really be successful and have an impact at your organization if it's just random people in little pockets. Maybe it's somebody in marketing using it for content. Maybe it's somebody developing new course outlines or new materials. So you take that really top-down approach to it and have buy-in at the senior level. It's going to be challenging. And then the other part is organizations that are truly taking that holistic approach to it, from not just can it help me create content, also can it help me market it and get it in front of more people? And then I think really critically is how can it help support my instructors, whether it's pre-class, during class, or post-class reinforcement. So I think you combine the top down with that holistic view of it really helps drive towards success. And as a training provider, from my perspective, it's ultimately about behavioral change. So how can I use these tools to help bring about more behavioral change for my learners?
There's so much there, Scott, and thank you for that obviously really experience-based answer. I think that we want there to be top-down buy-in. How much is that within our control? If we don't have that top-down buy-in and push, what can we do? Because that would be true for some people in the room. They've got great ideas, but management doesn't get it. What happens in that case, Scott? What do you do?
I think part of it is just starting on your own and developing out the use cases and then bringing it to the leadership of your organization and show them either, here's how I save time and cut costs. Here's an initiative that I used AI to help generate more revenue from the organization,
right, increase
productivity. That's how business leaders tend to think, is how is it going to impact productivity, income, expenses, revenue, reputation of the organization. So if you start to speak their language, it helps to get that adoption, because as you mentioned, it's not always going to come from the CEO or the president down. Usually things bubble up. It's just knowing how to tell that story and show the impact that it has had.
And if you're working in training provider, I think you mentioned there the idea of marketing content and so on, the idea that you might be able to turn around or maybe create some personas to test your marketing against, and then create content for those different personas and then test them out faster. That could be a legitimate, very powerful use of AI, not in the classroom, but certainly helping a provider. Taruna, it's great to have you here. Just mentioned the term work slop, which I've come across recently myself. I love it, the idea of AI created stuff that's really not very good, like that picture we saw earlier. The phrase I use is beige wave. I've got this sense that we have this wave of content coming towards us, which isn't really very good, but it's been produced by people who get over enthusiastic by using generative AI. And I think we're going to come back to the question of how, well, Klaus has raised a really good question. Can AI help me measure the value of the skills that my training imparted? Crucial question, Klaus. I'm going to save that one. We're going to go through, like, I don't know, another 30 minutes of Q&A. Then we're going to jump on to the questions from the room. I'm saving that one. Iris is saying, sometimes my thoughts aren't completely straight, so I can't blame AI, can I? Thank you for that a quick look at where we are. Scott, just following up on this theme of producing content, generative AI tools like ChatGPT do and can create content really quickly, but it's not always accurate. So how do we use these tools well, focusing at the moment on just content creation? I know this is a real concern for training companies, L&D people generally. I want to create some content, but I want to do it well. I don't want to create this work slop. What do I do, Scott?
There's a couple things I think of. One of them is, going through training itself on how to best use these tools and prompt these tools. The input that you give that from a prompt perspective can make a big difference on the output that you receive. So I think one, understanding how to best prompt the tools is important, but also it's this age-old adage of garbage in, garbage out, right? If you have solid content and you're using it to refine, for example, content and maybe create derivative works off of that, having sound content from an instructional design standpoint, and then maybe using a tool, whether it's a ChatGPT or Arlo's e-learning authoring tools, if you have good stuff that's going in, it's going to make it even better coming out, combined with strong prompting.
So, like any tool, use it properly and you'll get better results from it. Makes sense. Elena, you're dealing with this yourself. How do you make sure that I'm not sure you're using it for content, but you're using AI. How do you make sure you're using it right for content?
Well, I have to remind myself that I shouldn't just outsource everything. So part of it is discipline, frankly speaking, because I think it's easy to get caught up. And I think it's important for us as training professionals or anybody using AI, like when you're looking at using AI, obviously there's, anybody can create a training right now, right? But what makes you unique, what makes you and your delivery and facilitation and all those things is, in addition to hopefully your charisma and how you deliver and the effectiveness, but also your intellectual property, the research, the expertise that you bring to the table. So when you're just outsourcing it and not, spending some thought and putting it in, like really auditing as you go along, you're at the, risk of just being like everybody else. And I think that's what's going to distinguish training professionals in the future is like, actually, you have intellectual property, you have expertise, you have subject matter experts that are working for you. Make sure that they're providing their input and don't be so quick to just outsource that part, because that's the part that AI cannot do yet. Maybe it won't, but it cannot do that yet. And it's not something we should concern at this point. And anyway, so part of it, yes, it's going to save some time initially, but don't make sure it's not saving time where it shouldn't. And then the time that you are saving, this is where going back to like Scott's earlier point, is this is the time you can actually spend thinking about how do you communicate to senior leaders in your organization? How do you become a consultant for them, educating them about the best use of AI and like rolling that out and so on in the training program? So,
I've been sharing the same thought quite vociferously with people for a number of years. If you're doing 10 hours a week creating content and AI enables you to now do that in 2 hours, what do you do with the remaining 8 hours? And my answer is don't create more content, use it to do the sort of things you're talking about. Go out, be strategic, perhaps talk within the organization, perhaps go out and understand your customers better. If you're selling training to people, that's a great opportunity. But if you're just creating more content, you're not differentiating. I do love about the intellectual property bit there and the uniqueness you mentioned there, Elena. I think that's really important. And Andre is saying, anyone can create a terrible course with a prompt, and the key is your IP. And I've seen that. I think we saw that 2 years ago. A lot of people were creating courses at the press of a button. Not happening so much now. You make the difference with your expertise. Klaus, great comment here. My clients don't care what I teach. They care only about how much value is added. We're going to come back to this business of value later on. But Stella, let's talk about content just for a moment. How do I make sure I'm using AI well to create content?
Actually, I won't use AI to create content. I
At
think
all?
that's I think content creation, it's actually quite a misuse of LLM. To me, it's not about creating content. It's about using AI to improve or repurpose or adjust ideas and material we already have, to Elena's and also Scott's point about, your own IP, your existing stories, your insights from your learners, your models and framework, your case studies. Start with that, right? Don't, like, LLM is just going to be generic if you don't feed it context. It's just a statistical model. So everything, its output, it's the probability of the most likely outcome. So to everybody's point, it's going to be just very average generic content that looks the same. So use it to repurpose or reframe, but not to, ultimately is your own voice that, that matters, that differentiate. And also what I've been thinking a lot about is adding that building that layer of what I call human sense making. So by that, I mean, reveal those content for cultural and contextual fit, adding nuance based on actual challenges your learners are facing, and also always built in space for reflection and discussion.
We're pointing there towards something. Oh, Stella, by the way, getting a lot of plaudits here in the chat. Love that, Stella. Go, Stella. Great point, Stella. You've got a fan base.
I didn't pay them. Thank you.
Well, they're recognizing that what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and that this return to what's going to be the differentiator in learning generally, but particularly for training providers, this idea that, well, it's the humanity and it's the human skills, it's the point of context, which we've already raised, and intellectual property rising us above the average, because a large language model works on the average. So how do you get beyond that? Well, with all the things you've just been mentioning. Great comments. this is how it should be. Using it blindly makes us less efficient. Yeah, good, really good point. Thank you. All right. So, by the way, sorry, there was a great question from Janine. We're going to come back to questions later on, but I want to just ask this to everybody now because this kind of struck a chord with me. Janine says, I own a training company. Employers are asking us to teach Copilot so they don't have to rely on their employees to analyze big data. Question, am I putting myself out of business? Question mark, question mark, question mark. In other words, if you're training employees to use an AI tool that's built into their software, do you then, and that AI tool, Copilot, is answering people's questions for them, does that mean you're putting yourself out of business? I just think it's a really good question. I'd love to look at it right now, and then we'll get back to the pre-prepared ones. Elena, you're running your own business. You've got a startup. Does that sort of thing concern you?
Yeah, so it's I saw that question. I was like, it's a really great question. I want to look at it from a different point, though. I think that the reality is we don't know what's going to put us out of business or not. I think it's hard to predict. I think that sure, there's going to be a lot of things that we're doing right now, and I think about it all the time. Like when we look at tools, I'm like when we're building the tool, I'm like, man, I was like, but is this going to either you're going to rely on this, they're not going to do the consulting with us anymore, and so on. So that goes through my mind. But the reality is we don't know what we don't know. But what we know for sure is that some of it, yes, it's going to put us out of that particular world, which is, again, the way I think about business and the future of work is like, what are the things that are gonna, what should I double down on that I don't have to worry about? I don't have to ask myself the question, is it going to put me out of business? And if I'm worried about that, then that probably could be the reality. So instead it's like, okay, what are the other things that will distinguish me where people are still going to want to come back to our business and so on, right? So that's the question I would ask. I think, yes, the reality is that I think in the next 3 to 6 months, we're going to see a lot of change in organizations and in the way we do training and training facilities and all of that. So I would focus less on like what can happen. It's like, what are we doing to make sure that whatever comes, it doesn't just completely derail us? I think that's the choice that we have, is like being mindful of what are the things that actually work throughout the times. And some of those things, the relationships that we build, the quality that we deliver, right? The continuous innovation, continuous customer support, continuous customer service. These are the things that are going out of style. If you think about it, a lot of tools out there. One of the biggest things I have as a user is like, you can have a great tool. If your customer service sucks, like, I don't care how cheap you are, I don't care how great you sound. If I don't have somebody, a human being I can call and resolve my problem, I don't care how great your tool is. So I think, again, focusing on other things that will help us maintain relevance, maintain the need for us in the business, that's where I would look at it.
You've precipitated a whole cascade of comments now, Elena, which I can't keep up with, but very good. Focus on the possibility rather than necessarily on the negatives, and focus on what's always valuable. Janine's comeback was, well, what about the triumph? Will that triumph over cost savings? I'm going to come back to that point, Janine, but Stella, what's your take? Do we risk putting ourselves out of business if we're training people to use tools like Copilot?
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing out there and my concern, I think a lot of organizations and employers don't know what good quality looks like. I think they're just looking at, oh wow, it's fast, it's saving, it's all the metrics I've seen in measuring AI adoption. It's about how many hours it saves, right? How fast you can do something quicker. I don't see a lot of qualitative measures out there. So until and it's a reflection of the maturity of the organization in terms of AI adoption. Until we get there, I think it's going to take some time. Yeah, there's going to be some disruption. There might be layoff. I think it was IBM. They lay off a lot of people and they rehire a lot of people, right? So I think there's some case studies out there already. IBM, it's one. There's other examples as well. If you guys are interested, we can see if we can share these references and links after the webinar. I presume we can have a way to communicate with attendees and share these resources. The other study is MIT that came out recently to say, actually, companies that adopt AI, only 5% of that actually achieve productivity gain, right? So I think we're going through hype cycles of AI being, wow, this is going to really save money, this is a game changer, and it hasn't happened. And we've seen this before with other learning tech and other tech transformation projects. So until we get to, until the dust settles, we don't know what the real impact is. My take is, yes, there's going to be some redundancy, people tasks would get, displaced or replaced. And then I think somebody mentioned a door might be closed, but then a window would open. So that's very much my take on that.
And I would agree with that. I think that was a great point about the door and the window. Julian's raised a great point as well. On Copilot training, they're probably going to use it anyway. Let's differentiate on the USPs that we have and emphasize the importance of contextual and relevant content. People still are using things like Copilot really badly. There's, I think, plenty of money to be made in teaching people to use these built-in tools really well, let alone everything else that we can do. Scott, are we putting ourselves out of business? To come back to Janine's question.
I don't think so, because I think there's a few ways to think about it. I do think it's healthy to think that way, because it's oftentimes what drives innovation in an organization. Years ago, I remember going through a training on innovation. It was act or pretend as if your product or your service became illegal tomorrow. What would you do? I think back 5 years ago with instructor-led in-person training, where it wasn't maybe quite illegal, but it was very, very highly restricted due to the pandemic, a lot of organizations had to think differently. So anytime there's a big technological revolution, there is concern about job loss. But as the other folks have said, typically we do see people reskilling and shifting elsewhere. But then I also think through with analyzing data and using tools like Copilot as people are getting trained on that, ultimately, is it bringing about behavioral change, right? I can use tools to analyze all the data in the world, but if I can't communicate what that means to other people in my organization, that data really doesn't have much value. So you need to kind of think through, what does it mean for your training organization, perhaps the types of training you're doing, the level that you're doing, or the different organizations that you're working with.
It's great. Look, there's so much more I could say about this, and I'm thinking back to my own training days, training people to move literally from manual typewriters onto using Microsoft Word, and the difficulties they had with that. And then the question was, well, are we putting ourselves out of business? The answer was no. No, people still needed to have that training. So much more we could talk about. I'm going to get back into our pre-prepared questions, because we figure that's going to answer some of the things people have in their minds. But stick around, because we really want to keep watching the chat and having your questions. In about 15 minutes, we're going to put it entirely over to the floor. Okay, let's we talked about content a lot, because that's where AI, generative AI in particular, has been used a lot. And training providers will mostly use AI to create learning content, but of course that's not the only use. Can you comment on other ways that you've seen it being used to support particularly instructor-led training? So whether it's before, during, or after instructor-led training, whether it's live on live or if it's face-to-face, how can training providers improve their offering and stand out with the help of AI? Janine, coming back to her, said she worries about her instructors. I think there's lots of scope here. What can we be using AI for to enhance that role of being a trainer, face-to-face or online? Scott, do you want to start off on this one?
I think there's a lot of ways to use it. And what we've been doing on the soft skills development side is really starting to think through, how do we make the training that we're doing in the classroom stick? Oftentimes we might be limited to a day or 2 days at most with a group to focus on changing those behaviors. And all of us in the training space know that if people aren't immediately practicing those skills when they leave the class, the retention drops off precipitously, very, very quickly. So we want to provide them with tools that help reinforce it. So if we teach about public speaking and presentation skills, you work on learning the skills in class, but if your next big presentation isn't for 2 or 3 weeks and you don't do anything in between, the likelihood that you're going to be as effective using those skills a lot lower. So you can use AI and train it on your intellectual property, which we've been doing for 50+ years on helping people become more effective communicators. Train it to provide feedback in practice sessions, to do role plays. If you want to eliminate saying or ah, the AI can pick up on that and then link you back to perhaps reinforcement videos that you've created, or link you back to parts of the workbook that talk about how can I overcome this and work on this skill? So I think it's a fantastic complement to what happens in the classroom with the instructor, especially on the post-program reinforcement side.
I know you do this, Scott, but every time I think about it, it's just slightly scary to me that all that stuff which used to be done by, it's still done by human beings, of course, but you can augment it by saying, right, okay, here's what you need to learn. Now go and practice it, and you're practicing it with what? Just very quickly, how does it work? And am I being watched on camera? How does it work?
There's several different ways. Some of it is you can have role play conversations with avatars. And then another part of it is, yeah, you're turning on your webcam, you're using the camera on your phone, it's doing recording, it's providing a transcript, it's talking about your pace, even to the point where it can use the technology in your phone. If you want to talk about how you're gesturing, it knows that the phone was at my side the entire time. It didn't pick up on any gesture, so it's going to provide me feedback on that. Or if I'm flailing about, it's going to say that might be distracting. Remember what we talk about on how to use gestures.
You know, I love this idea, and I love the idea of these two systems, the human being and the practice, working together to augment what's happening. And after all, someone's going to learn, I think, with a bit more emotional connection to what they're doing when they get it from a human being than if they've learned it from a machine. But the practice, going back and practicing, would be hugely expensive to do with the human being. Having a machine to help you, fabulous.
Can I pick
Stella.
up on that? Oh,
sorry, no, Elena, jump in, go ahead.
So in addition to the reinforcement of learning, which I think is brilliant, and that's something we didn't have before necessarily, right? So like, I don't know about you guys, but as a trainer, like one of my biggest headaches was always like, oh my God, like they're learning, they're so excited, but then they walk away, and to Scott's point, like, oh, they're going to lose all this. And like, and then my ROI goes down, and then we go back to square one. So one, I love that part. The other part about this is the accessibility and availability. I think that's a really important one, because in many organizations, right, sometimes they'll just, we'll go in, we'll train a group, for example, and then they'll allocate specific coaching or tools to people that are like in senior positions, right? Because if you take a regular executive coach, it's $300-400 an hour per session, versus now everybody, we can scale coaching. It's accessible to everybody. It's available, and it's available at like 11 p.m., 12 a.m., whenever that person needs it the most, whenever they're learning at their best. And furthermore, what I found interesting as well is that sometimes people are not always going to just raise their hand, engage in a learning. They want to have a one-on-one conversation. And sometimes that one-on-one conversation is better had with a AI coach, right? So because sometimes you'd be surprised, like people don't always feel comfortable, or maybe say, this is a stupid question, I don't want to ask it. AI is not going to judge you, right? I mean, hopefully neither will a human. And then the last piece, which I think is like really game changing, at least in the work that we're doing, is the data and insights we can provide. So imagine this, if you as a trainer, you're going in, and let's say you're using an AI coach or whatever, some kind of tool where you're tracking engagement, where you're tracking interaction, you're not you're not recording everything they're doing, but imagine you're getting out themes from the AI coach that says like, hey, Elena, by the way, this group you're training, they're actually, a lot of the conversations are around, I don't know, public speaking, to use Scott's example, right? Like that's the topic they go to for this conversation. So it's like, okay, great. That's what this group really needs. So I'm going to go back and double down on that. And then furthermore, I can actually engage with the client and say, listen, based on the data based on the chatbot based on the interaction from your team members, here's what I'm seeing, and here's what makes sense to do as the next step in this training process. Again, real life data driven by the actual people and what they need in that moment in time.
So we can give people a human interaction. There can be instructor-led stuff, face-to-face or online. We can have that, and presumably then the training company could work with some of the information that's gathered from that and use that to augment the next offering, for example. Yeah. Use AI to augment, not replace what our instructors are doing. Stella, are you there? Are you reading the chat?
I am reading so many. Thank you. You.
It is fabulous. It's worth reading.
Yeah.
We're also here to answer questions. So, what is it that we could do with AI to augment what we do?
Yeah, actually, what Scott mentioned when he talked about the presentation skill, I remember a few years ago now, before this AI hype, there was a company that allowed you to practice your presentation skill with virtual reality goggles. And you remember that, Scott? I think there's more than one company that
More
does
than one.
that.
There was more than
Yeah.
one.
And it's that one that I was looking at, you can upload your presentation, and there's a technology, I'm not sure if it's AI at the time, it would analyze your tone, your diction, your pacing, and it gives you a report like as the first cut on how you do in terms of your presentation. But then as a second level subscription, then they offer human coach for more nuanced feedback. And I kind of like that two-prong approach, embedding human in the loop, so that machine is not, you don't stop at just the very perhaps more superficial level of feedback, right? And I think that works really well. It's layering the human to say, okay, for more qualitative, more nuanced feedback, you're working with an actual speaking coach. So
I've seen similar things.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've seen similar things with coaching tools and other things where it's almost like that the AI is a first level on a help desk, and then if necessary the person can escalate it to a human being to get the more nuanced instruction. So you can deal with a far large number of people, but your instructors are still very busy because they're providing that interaction.
I mean, the point I want to say is, I think the instructor still needs to be in charge, right? It's still very much have the final say. For example, I assume if you're doing a in-person facilitation, I've seen instructor using Miro boards in a physical space with touch screens, and then it can help, like you still have to facilitate the discussions, but the AI can help cluster your sticky notes. It can summarize your themes, or it can help generate your next step task. But then you as an instructor still have to guide your participants to say, okay, this is what you need to think about. This is how you need to act on. And also my concern is, yes, we can use AI, this great analytics we can use, this lots of data we can collect, but also be very mindful to get your learner consent, to make sure that you're interpreting your data the way that people are not being put in a box, they're not being stereotyped. So there's also valid concerns that we need to think about. So then you're not actually, confusing people or putting people off, because as we know, using tech poorly, it actually disengaged people instead of helping them, to learn and perform better. So.
Absolutely. I'm aware that we said we were going to be handing over to audience questions very shortly, probably in the next few minutes. So get your questions ready to throw at our panel. They're eager to deal with all your calls. Scott, I want to ask one last question. You're running a training business. We've talked about instructors. That's great. And, that's something that's very close to my heart. But you're running a business. How would you use AI beyond the classroom to augment and grow the business? What ideas might you suggest around that?
I think it goes back to what I touched on earlier with the 360 view of training. So as running a training organization, I need to think about, from the content, the intellectual property side, I need to think, okay, I have great content. How can I perhaps maybe come up with different versions of it, enhance it through using AI, whether it's tools like Arlo, ChatGPT, whatever it may be. Maybe I'm coming up with, within that content, pre-work, some things that are going to happen in the class, maybe pre-assessments. How do I come up with some of those reinforcement tools or guides so that when we use something post-class around the AI coaching, it's tying back to the content. So I want to look at it pre-class. It's like, okay, great. We have this great content. We have fantastic facilitators. We need to let people know about us. How do I use artificial intelligence, say from a marketing perspective and an automation perspective, to create efficiencies and maximize what we're doing while still maintaining our authentic voice? This is, I would say, one of the things that I do see organizations trip up on from a marketing perspective, is that they think, quantity is always better. And sometimes it can just delude your brand if you're just constantly pumping out 25 versions of the same thing over and over again just to try and game the algorithms and get more eyes on you. So you do need to be aware of it and think of it from your perspective. And then really going back to in the classroom, are there ways that the instructors can use artificial intelligence in the classroom? I think that's really where the instructor shine is in. So we focus a lot more of the effort kind of pre and post and on the marketing and communication side.
That's great. Elena, you're running your business. How do you use AI, not with content in mind, but just to boost the business?
So everything Scott said, I think a lot of the marketing stuff is where we can really do really good at. But I think about it from a little bit different perspective, because we are AI first business, so we're already like living that. We're already doing maximum with AI, let's put it that way. But what I think about is, what are we not doing with AI that maybe partners are, that could help us drive our business forward? So talking about, again, going back to data, who does better data than us, like data analytics, right? Like, instead of us trying to create or buy software, instead of what are some partners that could potentially help us analyze the data that we have to, again, continue to grow the business, deliver better results, deliver better strategy for our clients, and so on. So I look more at partnerships, because we're very agile, we're small. So depending on, how large your business is, you're not always going to be able to invest in the specific tool technology, but there's a lot of people that already build and they're already doing it. So who can you partner with that could be mutually beneficial?
So maybe not you, but there'll be maybe AI partners using AI tools that you could work with to boost your business. Yeah, Sarah's got a great question on protecting your training IP. Going to ask that, and that'll be one of the first ones we ask Sarah. But finally, Stella, just want to put that one to you. How can you use AI to boost your business?
Yeah,
your training business.
Yeah, right. No, good question. So as opposed to Elena, my take is I'm human first. So I am always thinking about how I can use AI to support people in terms of, primarily educator, L&D, training providers, everybody in the training and performance support business. So I'm, thinking about it from that perspective. How can we how can I make AI more accessible, more understandable? How do we upskill people in this space so we're not left behind? I like to say, it's not that, don't get into the AI hype, but don't let AI happen to you either. You don't want to be reactive. You need to be proactive in embracing the tools, the understanding, and get ahead of understanding the opportunities and the limitations. So I use AI actually to brainstorm about AI topics, to think about how I can you have different use cases, have a more nuanced discussions. I use my own IP to build on top of different content and different ways of communication. So that's basically what I do with AI.
And that's you giving a practical, real experience. That's fabulous. Iris raising a very good point. Look, she's got a tool that saves her an awful lot of time. Samantha from Google enables her to get a much faster view of her students' vocabulary, knowledge, and pain points. And I'd love to know what then goes on, what she then goes on to do with that. But it's a fabulous thing that you can have these tools that can save you a huge amount of time. I'm going to answer a quick question from Gemma. Gemma asked, can you expand on what you mean by using a persona? That was something I raised earlier. Persona is a marketing term whereby you're trying to sell your services to somebody, and you typically might say, well, there are 3 personas using our services. We've got Bobby, who's a keen enthusiast, got Jane, who is a seasoned veteran, and you've got, Wilbur, who is skeptical but can be convinced. And these 3 personas have different attributes, and you have to work out how to pitch your product to these 3 different personas. So that's just one example, and you can use it in many different ways. A lot of people using AI in that field.
Can I add to that, Don?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so persona actually came from human-computer interaction field, HCI, and what somebody knows at UX now. So it's basically, the idea is that we often, when we're designing a product or a service or creating content, we do it, we have ourselves in mind. We don't think about the end users. We don't think about who are we designing this for. So persona is a tool to help us understand who are your target audience, who is your target user, and to make it more concrete in understanding their world, their challenges, how they go about using your service, your product. So that's what persona is for, is to have that empathy and that understanding of somebody else's world.
And let's come back to the idea of using AI to understand different ways of viewing the world during the course of this chat bit. It's actually a really important use that I think isn't perhaps anticipated enough. Wibowo has raised a really good point. One of the key uses of AI is breaking down language barriers. With translation, trends can reach a wider audience. My research coming out next week, 54-page report, looks at the use of AI across, I think, 600 people, 50 countries. In English-speaking countries, translation is ranked 11th on a list of 16 uses. In non-English language speaking countries, it's ranked 5th. It's absolutely a powerful use of it that we in the Anglophone world tend to ignore. But outside that, yeah, absolutely, it's being used all the time. Thank you for raising that point. Right, let's jump in with one key question. Sarah asked this, then we're going to come to Klaus's point about impact and showing value. How do we protect our training IP, asked Sarah. Companies will have rules on how employees use AI, but is there any way to reduce the intellectual property that students will share into an open AI? So suppose you're talking with students and they're sharing your examples, your thoughts, your training IP, which you've built up over years, into an open AI system, and it's then out there in the internet, in a system which other people are using, and it's gone. How can we protect our intellectual property? It's a bit of a left field question, but rather important. Would anybody like to step forward and answer this one?
It's definitely a challenging one. As I think about it, internally, it's challenging enough, right? That can typically be addressed through education, having that top-down approach within your organization, right? Educating people as to what it means when you're copying and pasting something into a Gen AI tool and the implications of that, and putting out very clear policies. Similarly, I think you can take that from that vision of having a holistic approach to AI. And if I'm running a training organization, I'm having the conversations with the facilitators, the people that are interacting directly with the students, to share with them about what are the guidelines and policies around how to use our intellectual property that they may have in a student manual, and to not be feeding it and pumping it into these Gen AI tools, incorporating it into some of the policies that students are receiving when they are going into class, and being built into your materials, and having reminders and some of the follow-up stuff. So a big part of it ultimately is about communication. As of today, I'm not sure of any surefire way to prevent somebody just taking it and uploading it into one of these tools and running off with it. I know my team, we've worked through the AI tools that we have, one, to make sure that it's set not to train on other large language models, and the same thing that Elena mentioned with partners, right? As we're working with partners, one of the biggest things that we look at are the intellectual property protections that they have in place, making sure that our system's completely gardened off from any other models or organizations that they're working with, to make sure our IP is not getting mixed in there.
I think that's a really good point. You can have it just bundled in with the protective policies that you should probably have around any training. It is also the case that it's very difficult to police it, very difficult to control it. And it may be that the value of the training and the value of the offering has to extend beyond the intellectual property. And there may be examples you've worked on, or case studies, or whatever, exercises which are particularly brilliant, but which you don't want to have rendered elsewhere. My feeling is that part of the value of those is usually in how they are played out in a live setting, and to try to pull out some of that value from anything that's written and make sure that it's only imparted during the lesson, verbally or visually. Stella, you're smiling. Am I talking rubbish, or do you think there's something in that? Are there ways of protecting intellectual property?
Oh, I'm just reading comments, and the students are using it to write narrative verbatim. I was like, yes, university is a bit of a mess right now. No, I think agree. Scott's one about it's a very tricky one. One thing I always look at is the tools that you use. Is it does it have any, can you turn off the training, right? Is it a tool that it's public tools, or is it an internal tool? So that's first thing is to think about, checking in the tool's usage, and is your content being used as part of the training, and can you turn it off? Do you have any control over that? The other thing my thoughts about IP is, publish your framework or models out there early, instead of feeding it, put it out there, put a copyright or use it as a Creative Commons license. It might not protect you anyway, but just put it out there anyway, so then it's written somewhere, so then that it's like I put my AI literacy framework as a Creative Commons license, and I put it out quite early, and so I don't mind if it's being used, but I also this is my original framework, and I put claim on that. And other things, I don't know. It's still evolving so quickly right now. It's hard to get ahead of that and say definitively this is what you should do.
I'm going to jump forward to Klaus's question on value, because I think that's a really important one. How do we show the value of what we're doing, and can AI help me do it? Now, sometimes the answer to this is, well, we can just use the same techniques we've always used to show the value of what we do. But I do think that AI provides an opportunity here. Elena, I suspect you might have an answer on this one. How can we use AI to help us show the value of what we're doing, either directly or through some measure that we can point to?
I think there's two things. I think there's things we can look at that AI can deliver, again, like specific insights and data and all of that, right? But I think it's not even about the AI. I think our value, and maybe, I mean, at the risk of sounding repetitive, but what I've seen work over and over when I've had my other startup in 2019, and kind of how we survived through the pandemic and so on, and now seeing the shift that's happening now, I think the value is going to come from you partnering with that client. So not only just not only just worrying about how AI can, not just using AI to provide like, okay, here's the metrics, here's the data, there's the ROI. That's aside from the fact. I think, again, it's going to come, the value you're going to provide is going to come from the relationships you have, from the being a strategic partner to that organization, to that client that you're working with. I really think that's going to be the distinguishing factor, because I don't know about you guys, but after the pandemic, everybody became a coach, everybody became some kind of trainer, everybody, everybody's an expert, everybody got their certifications, right? 2 years in, everybody's a life coach. Like, none of that matters. You can have all the certifications in the world, you can have the best tools in the world. If you don't have trust with your clients, and trust meaning that you're, and that trust comes through also saying, listen, we can't do that thing you're asking. The expectations are unrealistic. I really think that's the human piece that's not going to be replaced anytime soon. And that's what I double down on, is the relationship building with my clients, because that's the value we're bringing. Everything else is like, it's happening, it's fine, it's already there. But this is the part that needs work.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, let's not underestimate the expertise and the quality of it and the importance of that when you've got instructors. But I do absolutely agree that this business of trust and relationships is something that humans offer, which is unique. And I actually made a conscious decision 18 months ago to spend more time traveling and talking to people face to face, to have conversations with them, to build that trust. I'm actually, and it's a really stupid idea, going to Slovakia in 2 weeks' time to do a talk to a bunch of people, just because I'm really interested in what they're doing. I'm not even getting paid for it. I just want to have that conversation, and we're going to build a relationship. In 3 years' time, something might come from it, nothing might come, but that face-to-face time is so important. So many questions. We've got 4 minutes left. I want to jump in very quickly and ask this one from Wibowo, because I love this one. Humans are really important, but trainers will now need to develop themselves further, place greater emphasis, following on from your point there, on sentiment, fostering engagement, keeping the audiences engaged while still maintaining their credentials. Given what we've just said, what is it that we think, and this is probably going to be our last question, what is it that we think trainers need to focus on in the future in terms of developing themselves and keeping themselves relevant? We'll start with Stella, because this is very much in your wheelhouse. Then I'll go to Elena and finish off with Scott. So Stella, what are the skills to be powerful as a trainer in the new world of AI?
Yeah, well, as you know, I developed a whole framework 3 years ago to address this question. So to me, I was unhappy with just so much focus on just the technology and how to use the tools, which I think we agree. There's no two ways about it. We need to use the tools. We need to understand AI as a technology, but there's so much more than that, right? it's a tech, so it's a continuum of the digital literacy that we've been building on as professionals. So I won't go into, I have a framework with 8 key areas, I can share that. But some of the things that I think we don't think often is critical thinking and sense making. Like I mentioned, we need human sense making and judgment more than ever because these outputs are not reliable. It's taking on other people's IPs, and so we need to be that much more critical and intentional. So developing that sense making skills, and it's important. Ethics, it's something very close to my heart, and also something that we don't talk about enough. It's how AI could be biased. It could be empathizing. Some of their biases, it could cause unintentional harms. And when we're using these tools, we need to be using it with our eyes wide open to understand the limitations and some of the potential dangers. And also the other area I would encourage people to look at is look at diverse use cases beyond our field. Don't look at just in, what's happening in education, look elsewhere.
Thank you so much. Listen, we've got 2 minutes left. I'm going to be really quick and give Arlo a chance to wrap up. Elena, in 30 seconds, 20 seconds, what do we need to focus on for the future?
So I always focus on the 3 C's: curiosity, courage, consistency. Be curious enough to talk to people who you completely disagree with. And when it comes to AI, if something triggers you and somebody says something you don't like about AI, ask yourself why. And if it's fear, that will help you get over it. Be courageous enough to know that we don't know what we don't know, and change is coming. It's inevitable. Just get used to it. And then consistency, it's not a one-time thing. This is a continuous disruption that we're going to experience. So stay consistent in all of these things that we're talking about: learning, growing, etc.
I love that. I'm going to pick courage as my takeaway from that one. They're all good, but courage, I think, is really important. Scott.
I think the biggest thing that instructors need to focus on and growing in is helping people understand the distinction between being able to find an answer through technology and AI and actually understanding and being able to apply what they found. Because if I have to keep going back every single time, that AI tool is not really benefiting me, because if I don't understand it and don't know how to actually apply what I found.
I've literally got goosebumps on the back of my neck. Absolutely spot on. Coming back to Stella's point about sense making, we've got to wrap up. I always, for my webinars, use this app. It's called the Big Clock app. It gives you a big clock. We're at time. I'm going to hand us back to our host from Arlo, Andre. Sir, over to you.
Let me share this very quickly. Everyone can see that. Well, look, I just want to say a big thank you to you all for joining us today and spending this time sharing your wisdom, and for everyone in the chat as well. There's been such good discussion, and I think this kind of reinforces that peer learning element. Often the instructor knows their perspective, but actually everyone in the room has lots of lived experiences that they can share as well, and it just makes it so much more engaging. So massive thank you. Please connect with all the panel and Don on LinkedIn and continue the discussion. Likewise with Arlo and myself. Also visit Arlo, check us out, and please book a call with one of our expert team. Would love to help you on your journey to modernize your offerings. But without further ado, thanks everyone, and we hope you all have a great day.